Welcome back, everybody. Listen, if you're new here, my name is Adrian, and this is Legally Everywhere. Because, child, what we legally everywhere, we looking into everything. And this is pretty much where we learn to think critically about current events. That's what this live is about. We're gonna be talking about current events and looking at it through a legal lens, because y'all know I love to do show and tells. I love to kind of reimagine content from a perspective of, I'm learning criminal law right now, I'm learning contract law, and I like to say, how can I apply that directly to what we're dealing with? So what do? I look at current events and I try to look at them through a unique perspective, a new perspective that aligns with what the lens of law, policy, and civic analysts. So earlier today, we officially kind of kicked off this week one of my 10 weeks of sprints through this content material. So I'll be doing a 10-week sprint through contract law and criminal law. Right now, we're doing some of the contract law content. So essentially, we're going to be doing this for 10 weeks straight. So definitely, we are at the beginning of this thing. Definitely stay along with me. But what we'll be doing is we'll be covering the foundations on week one. I'm going to show you a little bit of that as we move through. So we'll be talking about what a contract is, why it exists, the source of law, the role of presidents, and every single one of us kind of how can I make this like an everyday thing? Like every single one of us enters into contracts, right? A lot of times we enter into them without even thinking. You think about your phone when they say, hey, before you can use this new, let's say, service, when you do a phone update, like you got some terms and conditions we need you to sign, or you're not going to be able to use your phone, right? Or you're not going to be able to use your tablet, might not be able to use your car, or whatever the thing that you're interacting with, right? So really, we're familiar with the idea of contracts, but I think sometimes we're not as familiar with all the pieces that go into it. So I'm kind of looking at content from a little bit of a different focal point, right? So with that being said, child, I wanted to do things a little bit different. So I made a little bit of notes so I can keep us on schedule. I won't keep y'all long. But instead of just reading chapters and doing that, earlier today, I took a lot of my PowerPoints, lectures, master classes they've had us attending, all kinds of material, right? And I put that into Notebook LM to get us a podcast, because I can't give the lecture material out, but they can't tell me that I can't use it as source material and I make something else. So that's what y'all got in the live I did earlier. It's on the channel if y'all want to look at it. Essentially what we're doing is we're building on that, because that was some foundational information, right? Like I said, I don't like to just read straight up chapters and show that. I like to really kind of work through things. I like to show people the process. I like y'all to be a part of the process with me, right? So if y'all got questions, ask them. If I don't know, I'm going to try to figure it out, because that's what this whole process is about. It's like a show and tell. This is a learn out loud, learn with me. Help me, support me, and I'm helping to support you with all the information that I learned. I don't see why I got to keep it to myself. If y'all want to study with me, then you benefit from it, and I get to benefit from all the questions that you ask, all the different viewpoints that we'll have in this process, because, child, there will be many. Especially because y'all know me. I'm somebody who likes to do comparatives, and I'm somebody who like to look at current events, right? Because we be all in them receipts on this channel. We all into them receipts. So what we going to do today, we're going to look at a current event. So this is actually a current case, and see what it teaches us about contract law. Because I think that's one of the things, contract law doesn't always sound like a sexy topic, like maybe some of the other topics, because they ain't introduced it to you the right way, right? They didn't bring it to you the right way. So I'm hoping I could give it to y'all the right way, and y'all can help give it to me the right way, so that we got this going in the right kind of situation. We want to make sure this goes, right? So with that being said, that's why I came up with looking at this Trump case, because I saw this. Y'all know I'm all, like I said, all up in them receipts. So I stayed on Reuters, and I saw something come through. I said, wait, what? It said 300 accounts closed. I said, that's got to be a contract law. If I ever seen something that sounds like we need to be diving in and figuring that one out, right? It's so interesting. It's a current event. It's new. Information is always rolling in. So it'll be a fun topic to get our teeth into. And because we're starting at foundations, I thought it'd be really cool to work through the information that we can find online. And it's not going to be I'm doing all this in one live, so don't expect that. But we will be kind of chopping into it based off of the material that I outline for each week, right? So there's 10 weeks of straights. I keep calling them straights because I'm pew. But there are 10 weeks of sprints. If you follow like a project management structure style, right? And based off of where our learning process is supposed to be for that week, we're going to be looking at the content from that perspective. So I really hope y'all enjoy this. I'm trying to have a lot of fun with this. I like to try to find fun ways of interacting with material that I have to learn, as well as finding ways to reimagine the stuff I'm introduced to. Social media feeds you all kinds of content, so I try to make it fun. I try to make it fun for myself, and I love sharing that with other people so that they can have fun with me. Because this can be fun. I see people are in the chat. Thank you for the engagement. You all are saying hello. I bid you a hello, greetings, and all those good things. So, like I said, we're gonna go ahead and jump into what does this current case actually teach us about contract law? Okay. I kind of want y'all to notice what I didn't ask, right? What I didn't ask was who was right. What I didn't ask was who was wrong. What I did not ask was whether I agree with this side, that side, or any of that. What I'm actually asking is the same question I feel like any law student would kind of ask when they're first kind of looking at some material. So I want to jump us in. Hopefully y'all can see this. So I want y'all to see. Y'all know how I am. Listen, y'all know every time I come to y'all, come to y'all with some visuals because I'm a visual person. Okay. So we got a form that I created. And this is kind of like my analyst. This is my process, mental process. We're going to be trying to answer these questions. Okay. So this is what the form looks like. Matter of fact, let me flip this because I can see it, which means it needs to be mirrored. Here we go. This is the version that you can see. Okay. That is the version that you all can see. So, if you look up at the very top, right now, matter of fact, I'm showing the wrong one. Y'all like, yeah, what you got going on? Everything. Let's see. Let me pull this back so I'm not giving people some visual input that is uncomfortable to your eyes. Let me flip this. Okay. Let me put this in the background really quick so I can make sure y'all have the flipped version. Let me add that back up there for you. I'm going to do that from my computer. Okay. Let me look. Do y'all see the one that's flipped in reverse? Also, take a screenshot while y'all at it because we're going to be filling this in. Let me look. There we go. Hopefully that's reading correct on your side. Just so that y'all can see that. Okay. So what does this case teach us about contract law? Let's scroll up. So as you can see, once again, this is a case active. Okay, so we have Trump Organization versus Capital One, because I thought that was very interesting, right? I'm gonna show you the Reuters article that brought us here. So this is the worksheet. So we're gonna have our starting point, which is gonna be what? The starting point, in my opinion, is the entry point. Is what gets us right at the door. That's right here. For me, it was a Reuters article. Sometimes when I do this for other things moving forward, it might be a court filing, some other way of accessing a current event. And trust me, as we move through this, I will be pulling up the court filings. We're just not doing that today because that's too much for me right now. I'll just put all this together. But we will pull the court filing and we'll read things in upcoming, let's say, lives or episodes, if you will. But yeah, the starting point is the Reuters article. I have it sitting in shorts, but I'm also going to show you that clip, okay? I'm going to show you exactly what it looks like so that you can see it for yourself, because that's going to be our starting point. Then we're going to move to primary source trail, which is going to be this green section right here. That's going to look like complaints, amended complaints, motions to dismiss, response, reply, court orders, account agreements, public exhibits, if you will, banking regulations, anything like that. It could also be like news reportings of certain things as well. But we're going to be, essentially, we're trying to get into these receipts. We're trying to figure out what they're talking about. And then we're going to move to the third part, which is what do we know? Not like just what we think, not just how we feel. I think sometimes that comes up just because some of the, let's say, strategic actors have political positioning. So I think sometimes it can become political. But in actuality, we don't want to base it off how we feel about any particular person. We don't, what I'm thinking. We want to say, like, what do we actually know? What can be supported? What can be verified? Those kinds of things. So we'll establish that from our actual sources. Then it's the part that I find really, really fun, which is like what is still unknown. Because I feel like a lot of information is going to be very much unknown because this is still what actively going on. This is not a case that's been resolved. This is something where they're actively having communication, which is how I end up coming across it in Reuters. So that would be part 4. That would be the orange portion of this. We would transition into like my Legally Everywhere framework, because people who have been on my channel know we do have a Legally Everywhere framework that I typically tend to operate through. I've modified for the studies so that it makes sense, right? I'm not just putting stuff out there. And when I say just putting stuff out there, I mean things that don't necessarily align with what I need to know for exams and what I need to study for right now. But it's still very much in alignment with the framework that we have on this channel for how we look into information, right? So for Legally Everywhere framework adapted, we would say the rule, right? What legal rules appear to matter? Then we have policy. Why does this rule exist? Because y'all know I'm always like, we'll make it make sense, right? It all needs to make sense. The purpose, why, problem, pretty much what problem is the law trying to solve? That's huge, right? Like, what is the law? Like, what problem is law trying to actually solve? That part, right? Because that helps us also understand other cases that we might want to cite, so to speak, or look into to see, like, does it support or go sit in opposition of, and we'll be digging in that type of stuff later. So I'm doing an examiner's lens because I told you guys I'm going to be sitting for an exam. So with that being said, I need to do issue spotting and look for certain kind of things. So I have little notes I make on the side for that. Let's see. There also is like a practice lens. So if I represented a client, right, what document would I immediately request? Because what we get into these receipts, we might go look it up. It might be accessible for us. And guess what? If it's accessible, you know we all into it. Now, y'all know one thing I'm not going to do is put things that I don't believe to be open and accessible, right? If it's not in public domain and it don't seem like it's open and accessible, we won't be putting it on this channel. You can do that on your side. You can come back with them receipts and let us know, okay? But what we will look up eventually down the line is we will look up if any of these things become somehow accessible in public domain, we will be looking into it, right? So if we were representing a client, what things will we be looking for? What documents, right? So the contract, emails, correspondences, notices, amendments, internal policies, okay? Let's see, court filings, etc., etc. So that would be that section on there. Then we have like the memory anchors. For me, I'm always looking, how can I hook this into my memory? How can I hook it? Because what I'm going to be doing an exam, I need to remember. And it's going to be a whole bunch of cases like this that I have to remember. So we need that anchor. Visual sketches, y'all know me. I always got a couple pieces of pad of paper drawing something. And then sometimes I ask AI, like, really bad, put your sauce on this, right? Put the swagger on this and give me something. And it does it, as y'all can see with these images. So then the next piece would be like related concepts. The related concepts, as we work through the worksheet, right? The related concepts would be offer, acceptance, consideration, intention, capacity, legality, express terms, implied terms, breach, remedies, other potential concepts. I also wanted to put common mistakes, things that, you know, could be a common mistake in how we're approaching it or looking at it, because those are things I want to correct within my own process. So if somebody is also studying this kind of material and you like, wait a minute, I see where you was going, but that's not quite correct, right? Put it in the chat, okay? Put that in the chat. Help me out. Help us out. Because like I said, we learn together. We learn out loud. I'm not above correction. As a matter of fact, I'd appreciate it. If you have insight and information, and you like, I see where you was going, but that is not exactly what that meant. That's helpful information. If nothing else, it helps me just build on a response for opposition. So please allow me to have that opportunity. Share that with me. So once again, be on the lookout. Be in my 6 and go ahead and put that in the chat. Or on the videos at some point, if you find something, you're like, oh, I think I get where you were going, but maybe you should link this way because of this, or maybe this case law states this, etc. and so forth. We're working from week 1 right now, so it's going to be a lot of the basics, foundation things. But once again, like math, this builds up, right? One thing builds on the other. So don't be afraid to go ahead and put in the chat, because I will be reading, I'll be watching, I'll be listening, right? And not like a creepy way, because that almost sounded like wow, didn't it? But yeah, I will be reading the comments. I will be engaging with you guys directly in the chat, as well as once this stuff is put back on the channel as just a regular, you know, viewable live. So feel free to engage. I also put on my form 1 minute understanding, which you can see right here at the bottom, right here, 1 minute understanding. Because I'm one of those people, I like to have like something I can just grab and go. You know, like a store, just like a snack, like grab and go, right? Grab and go. It give you what you need, but it's not too much, right? So the grab and go. So then we move from there. We go to missing facts, which would be, you know, within the contract, the facts, the law, the evidence. We'll move into what does the case teach us? Like I said, grab and go, the key takeaways. And then we move over to section 8, which is new research steps. Because what y'all know me. Y'all know me. Pull the receipts, read the motions to dismiss, read the account agreement, read the court order, identify key law and regulations, update the worksheet, because yes, I do have a worksheet. This is my format, so y'all know once we get done with this, I'm typing it all up and I'm getting to it, because what we studying, we learn it together. So y'all know y'all are part of the process. I have revisit after week 2, 3, 5, etc., and review before the exams, right? So that is what this form looks like. I did 3 for today. Okay. Any questions so far? I see some engagement in the chat. Thank you all so much for your engagement in the chat. As like I said, I'm navigating working through this content. I'm just having so much fun putting this together. You guys are my people and y'all are my tribe. And I like to show y'all the information, show you all the facts. So let me go ahead and show you. One of these pages are missing, actually. Let me see if it'll. So this is a Reuters article. If y'all familiar with Reuters, it shows you. But let me pull image 1 so that y'all can see that. Let's see. Did it not want to add? So incredibly interesting. Okay, so we're going to just work with these 2 pages, but if you go on Reuters, you'll see. Oh, wait a minute. That is the wrong article. Give me 1 second. I'm going to pull it right. Okay, hold on 1 more second. I'm getting it loaded right now. Look like my document switched up on me. All right, y'all. I apologize about that one. Okay, so we back. And we want to make sure that that piece is there so that y'all can see the verified article. Because that's super important, right? So the verified article says, this is from Reuters. So Capital One says anti-money laundering review prompted closure of more than 30. My apologies. More than 300 Trump-affiliated accounts. Trump Organization and Eric Trump sued in March 2025 alleging political debanking. Miami federal court tossed 2 complaints but let plaintiffs file amended versions. Okay? So we can see this right here coming straight out of Reuters. Now, when we see something about amended versions and federal court filings, right? We saw at least 2 federal court complaints and then amended versions, right? So amended filings. These are things that we should be able to look up. We see that Capital One says they had an anti-money laundering review team, right? And under that anti-money laundering review, that prompted closure of more than 300 Trump-affiliated accounts. That's some of the information that we're working with, right? So when we're going to go look at what are verifiable receipts, what information do we have? That's what we're looking at. Are we going to go pull those records in an upcoming live? We certainly are. But right now, our introduction to this information is Reuters, right? So it says the Trump Organization and Capital One did not immediately respond to the request for comments by Reuters, right? So I do want to make sure that is put there. Also, Capital One states Capital One has never accused the Trump Organization of illegal money laundering. But Friday's filing, right? Filing means something we can look up. Friday's filing argues that quote, the documents and the plaintiff's own allegations make clear that Capital One closed plaintiff's accounts for anti-money laundering, AML reasons. Okay? The closures were the result of months of analysts and careful review by Capital One's AML, which means their anti-money laundering team. In accordance with bank policies, which means that's something we can look up, as well as regulatory guidance. Also sounds like something we could potentially look up, dig into to try to understand the contract itself, what language, what agreements, right? What's the offer? So this can be pretty fun as we dive in. Once again, we're not saying who's right, who's wrong, who did what. Child, we can leave that to the legal system to do. But what we will do is we'll use the case study as a point of kind of like taking the information from a contract law course and saying, how can we apply that today? Okay? So that's what we're going to pretty much be doing tonight. So this is the first time that I'm really introducing this particular framework and the analyst board that I generated. So I'm really excited to share with you guys, see what you guys think. I'm also like processing things. So like y'all know how I like to let it marinate a little. The goal was never to jump to any type of conclusions. It's to slow ourselves down and to think about it like lawyers, because one thing I've been learning is that lawyers look at information differently than the average person looks at it. So we would want to be able to interact with content differently. So at least that's what I'm doing, right? So we can see this is verifiable by Reuters. You can go check out Reuters right now, and you can see the same thing I have right there. That front page is missing, but whatever. This was the live that I did earlier today. If you want to get a little bit more of the foundational things, this live's a little bit more about application. I'll embed in a lot of the core material, but if you want a little bit more of a deeper dig, that would be this live right here under this cover. Make sense? Just in case that causes people to have like visual overstimulation. Okay, this was the cover. I knew I had it on here. Okay, so Capital One, so this is August 1st. So Capital One says it closes Trump's organization's accounts after anti-money laundering. So that will be the article. This was August 1st at 7:19 p.m. I took it on August, I'm presuming, the 2nd. And it had been updated at that point 5 hours before 1:25 Eastern Standard Time. Okay? Kenrick is the author of this article. Okay? And we move in sequence. So this would be what? Our entry point. That makes sense. So when we think about that first form I showed y'all, it makes sense that that would be the entry point. The Reuters article is my entry point. Why am I even looking at this, right? So the question becomes, why am I looking at it? Okay, then what happened? We have the what happened. The what happened so far is the accounts were closed. We already see that it's in connection or reportedly in connection with the anti-money laundering probe team analyst, right? So we already kind of have that. So as we start to work, what are we looking at? So then we also have some other elements, and I'm going to show you my Legally Everywhere board. This is my Legally Everywhere board, and this is for week 1. Okay, so as we look at the week 1 content, putting the version that y'all can see, that's mirrored. I'll get a stand, I think. Okay, so as we look, right, week 1, we are in week 1 of what? Week 10. I told you we doing 10 weeks of sprints through this material. So 10 weeks. This is week 1. In week 1, we're really just covering foundation. So just identifying the contractual relationships, identifying the parties, identifying the governing sources of law. Okay? When we do that, we will then what? We will veer over into historical patterns, right? If you want, we can actually work it in the other way. We'll do it the other way. How about that? We'll work it from there of understanding, identifying the contractual relationships, identifying the parties, identifying the governing sources of law. From governing sources of law, we're going to look at the what? We're going to look at the legal authority. The legal authority, as in the contract, the account, the agreement. Then we're going to go into what's the structure. We know it's common law, not civil law. This is the United States. The United States is under common law. Banking regulations, right? That was discussed in the article. We know that a part of that legal authority and the structure of how that's set up is the banking regulations. Anti-money laundering framework. We know that they're subject to that with regards to the framework and the authorities, you know, when we're talking about legality. The court procedure, there's been court filings, federal court filings with that. So we know at this point, based off of that, that is a piece of this puzzle. So knowledge status, where are we? What's been covered? Contract, relationship, source of law, jurisdiction. That part we know, right? We kind of preview a little bit of considerations, especially since we talked about that in the earlier live, which would be the Williams versus Roffey. But that's not really going to be covered in week 1 material. I certainly can bring some stuff up depending on like what kind of engagement we get in the chat, because it's already somewhat been discussed in the previous live that we did earlier today and the other week 1 foundational content. But that's not the focus. That can be a little bit of preview, you know, get a little preview, right? But not exactly the focal point. Just so you can have future knowledge, we will be incorporating express terms, breach, and remedies. Okay. So that is a piece of the puzzle. That's all right in here. Then we move down. Y'all know me as a mediator. I'm always looking at mediation lenses. So like at what opportunities do we have to like negotiate, to get a win-win, to resolve the matter, right? So when I looked at that from mediation context, it was, could negotiations have resolved this dispute, right? Could they have really talked it out and resolved the issue? I think about interest versus position. I think about the commercial relationship and the preservation, right? Also, once again, we'll talk about the commercial relationship. That's another reason why I said the preview to considerations, because that was the commercial, let's say, interest, played a big factor in this particular case when we talk about considerations with Williams and Roffey. So, just a kind of little touch. I'm not gonna dive in unless I see something in the comments. But also, when I think from a mediation perspective, I think about information exchange, right? Because you do have a lot more flexibility when you're talking about mediations than you would when you strictly go to court. You know, that's one of the uniqueness or unique elements. I feel like mediation, you can really find something uniquely that can work for the two people involved, or better yet, the parties involved. As long as, you know, nothing's criminal that would be a public interest concern, usually you're able to kind of like come up with creative ideas. I've seen people come up with all kinds of creative ideas that are workable for them, but still what legal. You cannot, you know, contract for illegal matters. So, yeah, well, we'll leave that there. But I'm always looking at that piece, right? Impact is actually at the very bottom, so we move around this whole entire piece before we go down to the impacts. So I will come back to that piece. I just didn't want this to be too long on the screen. But geographical context. We'll move to geographical context, right? Banking stability, regulatory oversight, financial crime prevention, right? Because they said this is an anti-money laundering team. So once again, there are certain elements with that, right? Financial crime prevention, public confidence, right? Commercial relationships. Once again, that commercial relationships element coming back up. Okay, back to these strategic actors, right? Who's in the room? Who's in the room? Some people were here when I had that series. Put a thumbs up in the chat if you were present when I was doing that series. But strategic actors, Capital One, right? Trump Organization, account holders, because 300 accounts, right? That had some changes that happened, right? So account holders, courts, banking regulators, the anti-money laundering compliance team. Those are some clear strategic actors. Then we go to the historical patterns. Now we can kind of outline that, right? Freedom of contract, evolution of banking regulation, right? Because if you think like, I don't know, maybe 30 years ago, maybe they didn't have anti-money laundering whole teams, right? So the evolution of banking regulation, reasonably so. A lot of things happen with money, right? So a lot of things potentially could happen through that particular pipeline. So the evolution of that and how does that affect contracts at various points. Once again, the anti-money laundering compliance, commercial certainty, right? Common law and legislation, right? The laws. What's going on? So those are some elements. And then once we consider all of those pieces, then we kind of come back down to the power dynamics and the impact, the harm absorption, as you know, I always like to phrase it, but for the sake of this, I'm just going to say impact. Impact being, businesses, banks, consumers, what the consumer, future litigation, contract drafting, compliance practices, future presidents, right? Because what happens with this case might impact things that can happen with future cases, because this might set a precedence for certain things depending on how it is carried and handled. Oh, so contracts pretty much can it's a part of everybody's life. For one, let's start there. Like I said at the beginning, we commit to so many things that we don't even think about. When your phone doesn't update, they typically tell you, hey, we need you to click and sign, acknowledge that you were informed, right? Accept these what terms and conditions. We interact with contracts all the time without thinking about what we really are committing to, what that might mean. Sometimes people change the terms. Sometimes you'll get a notification from an organization that you're working with or a service that you've been accessing, and sometimes they'll say, hey, we're giving your information to a third party. Click to say you accept. Click here, and then you can exit out. Sometimes they don't give you that extra third click, and they just tell you, listen, your information is being accessible by this third party. Some people sit and read those contracts and see that information and understand it. And sometimes people don't even think anything about it. But every day, we are having, let's say, agreements that we're making, right? Someone's making an offer, and we are determining, if we want to accept that, right? Sometimes we are renegotiating some of those terms and saying, okay, maybe, that first part I wasn't feeling all that. Maybe the second piece, I'm willing to accept that. Okay, we agree. Now, we've walked into this contract. You can hold me accountable for that. And then people are saying, hey, I'm going to do this. I'm going to follow through, or I don't follow through. And the actions are carried about, right? In a very simplistic way, right? Because lots of language, a whole process, which I will show you the lifespan, or let's say the life cycle of a contract in contract law. Like, we encounter that, right? We encounter that. It sounds very familiar, but when we say contract law, people are like, ooh, But it can be very interesting, and I'm finding that it's just very, very, interesting, if nothing else. So let me quickly just look into the chat, see what is going on. Hello, hello, hello. Once again, welcome to the chat. So when we talked about the board that I showed you initially, right? The whole point is, I'm just going to explain the board just very concisely because I see different people coming to the room. It's pretty much being organized. Everything that we're discussing pretty much can be organized into those predominantly like 4 areas. So we have 4 phases, so to speak. You have discover what happened, analyze what legal and historical lens helps us understand it, right? The third one will be integrate. How does this connect to what we're studying this week? 4, transfer, right? Because I'm always about transferable skills, like, because we all could use that, especially in this economy. Like, everything gonna look, how can I connect what I know to something else I'm trying to know, or something else I'm trying to do? Hello. How do we apply what we learn to exams, professional practice, everyday life? Because we're not going to fill out all these boxes today. Y'all know we're not about to fill out all these boxes today. But this is the structure that we'll be moving throughout this week. And honestly, throughout the next 10 weeks. Each week will fill in some pieces that we addressed from the previous week. But there will be missing pieces, and that will be the pieces that we're working through. We'll be pulling primary sources. I'm so excited about this. Y'all have no idea. This is going to be so much fun to me because I feel like we're being very intentional about how we're interacting with material. Part of learning the law is recognizing what you know, more importantly, what you don't know. And well, like what documents you still need, what things you need to get further knowledge on, right? Some of these things, because this is actively going on, we may not be able to access even if we know that it exists. It may not be in public domain. And for the point of where we at, that's okay. I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this whole entire process. And I wanted to invite y'all to this experience with me. Y'all know I'm really big on, as I've been calling them, show and tells and learn with me setups, right? And I feel like case studies is always one of those really fun ways that we can do what we can learn together. So as I was studying and looking at quite a few things on this channel, we do what? Case studies. If you look at my channel, a lot of it is case studies and comparative law. A lot of it. So this is one of those projects, if you will. Okay, so let me look, see if there's anything in the chat. Any questions? Okay, because like I said, for me, the entry point is what? For me today, it was Reuter's article. It could be anything. It could be something on TikTok. It could be something on YouTube. Maybe it's something you just see on your regular news stations if you're watching regular news stations, right? Sometimes a lot of these news stations are on social media. What? Because they know how to get to the people, right? Primary source. Once you got that information, now we're looking for what I like to call the stress test. The who, the what, the when, the where, the why. We want to get all those details. We want to pull it from multiple sources, but we want to get that information so we can start outlining these pieces for our little analyst board. Okay? So I'll put it this way when it comes to the primary source too. Like a news article can get us like super interested. And that's why I say like I like to start there, what they got going on. Then we're going to dig deeper. So like I said, in the upcoming live, we're going to get into some court filings. Court filings would tell us each side perspective, like what they're actually arguing and what they're saying in the courtroom, right? Not just what they're saying on the interview. Oh, that's nice too. You know, we want to see what are they saying in those court situations. And then the contracts, if we're able to access them, the contracts would tell us exactly like what they agreed to, because it's a contract law. We want to see, what did you actually agree to? What did you offer? What did you agree to? Okay, now that we know those terms, we have that language, we can see, did you perform or did you potentially breach? We don't have the information to get to that particular question today, but we certainly got enough to get our mouths nice and salivated, right? Sounds interesting. So I'm gonna ask y'all a question. I told y'all about my notes. If you were representing one of these parties, based off what y'all seen thus far, I did give y'all the Reuters article, and we did kind of map out some of this framework. If you were representing one of these parties, let's say tomorrow morning, that's quick, right? What's the very first document you'd ask the client to send you? Put it in the chat. Put it in the chat. What's the first thing you would ask them to send you? I'm gonna give it a second before I say what I would want. If you were representing one of these parties, right? Party A, party B. What would be something you would be asking for? What document might you ask for? Let's go to the smaller one. This one's what y'all can look at and see. What might you ask for? Now, y'all don't have to have all the answers today. This is just an introduction, right? But if it were me, I want to see that contract. If it were me, I want to see that contract. Listen, I still have the original printouts from my very first debit card, credit card, over a decade ago, okay? Oh, well over a decade ago. The ones I first signed as an adult by myself without my parents on my stuff. Oh, yeah. I still got those in folders. You know how when you first go get your cards and you set up, they give you this. Who don't have them? I do. I remember asking them. I remember one time they're like, "Oh, you actually." I remember I went to go get another card at some point in it. They said, "Oh," they said something to me. I said, "Why is the percentage? The percentage looks different. Can you explain that?" And they're like, "Oh, wow, you know." I said, "Yeah, I did." And they explained, the differences, right? The different cards that they offered and why they felt one would be better than the other. And they were able to explain it, but they said, wow, I've never had someone actually ask me a question. I was like, well, why, thank you. I just so happen to be one of people like to read all the things I sign. I was told as a child to read everything that I sign. So I would sit there and read through. I don't believe I read every single word like to memorize. I might have skimmed it, but I noticed the numbers when they would look a little different. I'm like, wait a minute, there's something different out here. And I kept looking, and it hit me. Like, I think the numbers are different. Explain this, please. Right? The very first thing, if I had this, without driving in too much, the first thing I want to know is, I'm like, let me see the contract. What is it outlined? Because that's where our meat and potatoes is probably going to be sitting. You agreed to that when you set up with these banks, right? There's usually some prescriptive things that are already drafted up. Maybe they have a special relationship or a special type of contract. I don't know. We won't know until they see it. That's why I want to see that. What did you agree to? Because I'm sure with the bank, it's something pretty standard written up. I doubt they just doing things without something being written up. So there's some paperwork somewhere, and I would like to see it if I was representing them. Like, see what's our stand-in when you say X, Y, and Z occurred, right? Let's see. I would want to get language about that anti-money laundering team, right? What does that process entail? You're talking about a framework. Well, what's the framework? Is that something that y'all made accessible for people to know about? It seems like that would be in the interest of consumers. But did you make anything about that accessible? Did this person know before they were going under review that they were under review? Did they give an opportunity to explain whatever suspicious things that got flagged? Did you give them an opportunity to explain, that movement, whatever movement that was, right? I would have those kinds of questions. What kind of notifications did you send out? What kind of notices, right? Or notices is the proper word, right? When it was actively occurring, not after the fact, but like when it was happening. You're like, hey, that looks suspicious. Put you under review. Did you notify them that they were under review? Did you allow them to, kind of respond to the review, appeal? Like, what was that a process? You got a whole framework. You should have a process. Where is that written out? Is it like a playbook? Is it like a what do we want to call it? Like a SOP? Like, I want to see whatever y'all got relevant to that. Granted, the playbook and the SOP is more like internal operations, but when you get to this point, they need something to support that they didn't just isolate and treat just one person this way as opposed to it being standard. That'd be my assumption, right? We're gonna be looking in for more specific, but if it's asking what I'm just thinking, just genuinely, that would be a question I would have, right? What's going on? So that was just my question. I want to see y'all put anything in the chat. Did y'all put anything in the chat? Y'all put anything in the chat? Okay. So from my perspective, it's just about asking questions, asking better questions, asking informed questions. Because we trying to right now, we just gathering information. There's no conclusions. We don't have enough information for some conclusions. We just getting information. So then, as we move through, I also kind of wanted to bring up the fact that we're talking about considerations. You'll notice when I talked about in the framework considerations, let me come here. You'll see that in the preview section, I put considerations. That's Williams versus Roffey. I'll just show you briefly what that looks like with regards to this one. I just feel like it's really significant because it talks about the commercial realities of things and how commercial relationships sometimes can change things, especially when it comes to that consideration portion. So that's why I immediately was like, okay, let me index this one. So, like I said, we talked about it earlier today because it helps me understand how precedence develops. But I don't want to force that doctrine into this discussion quite yet before we actually ever looked at the like agreements or the pleadings and the filings that we look in the court file and shit. So I don't want to push that one yet. But I definitely feel like we want to put that on the back burner, kind of look at it a little bit, get a feel for the fact that that might be something to be looking at or being mindful of, right? So I did put that there. One thing I just thought also with keeping that piece in mind, I'll give you the 1 minute breakdown of it. So in the Williams versus Roffey brothers of 1991, just to give y'all, just so you understand when I'm referencing it, Williams was a subcontractor who was falling behind schedule and facing financial difficulties. Roffey promised to pay him extra if he completed the work to avoid delay and penalty clauses in its main contract, right? In the main contract. Williams completed the work, but Roffey refused to pay the additional amount. Okay, he refused to pay the additional amount. The Court of Appeals held that since Roffey received a practical benefit, which was avoiding delay or penalties, right? The promise was supported by valid consideration. By valid consideration, provided there was no economic duress or fraud. Okay? That is the Williams versus Roffey's pretty much in like a minute. Just little, y'all know how I am. Stop and go. Get that snack. Get that snack. Get it real quick. We don't got time to be doing all. We got a lot to remember, right? I have a couple other perspectives, like related cases. So the Stilk versus Myrick, which was 1809. Yeah, we getting there, right? The sailor demanded extra pay to sail ship to destination. What was held was no consideration. So, existing duty, right? That existing obligation. Very, very strict rule. When it comes to, let's distinguish that with. So you have Folks versus Bear, okay, which was something I like to distinguish this particular case from, right? When we're talking about distinguishing Williams. The promise to accept part of a debt, right? And it was held no consideration. Keep in mind, I told you a big part of Williams is the consideration, right? And the practical benefit doctrine does not apply with the Folks versus Bear. And another related one that I found was the Central London Property Trust versus Hightree, which is the promissory estoppel. Equity may prevent a party from doing, pretty much from going back on promise in certain situations. Keeping in mind, like I said with the Williams and Roffey brothers, the one sentence breakdown, if I will, like a promise to pay more for the performance of an existing contractual duty may be supported by what consideration? If the promisor, right, receives a practical benefit and the agreement is free from economic duress. Okay? So that was the holding. The promise of additional payment was enforced. Practical benefit received by Roffey constituted valid consideration. So why this case matters, the case modernized the law of consideration by recognizing that the commercial reality sometimes justifies enforcing promises to pay more, even when an existing contract duty already exists. Okay? So that's just a quick little, little quick and go. If you want a memory anchor that I came up with, it's cheaper to pay more than to start over. Right? It's cheaper to pay more than to start over. So think of a builder who pays extra to avoid delay, penalties, and the cost of replacing the contractor. That's how I kind of think of this case when I think of it. So immediately when I was hearing this particular case that we're looking at, I immediately started to think about that case. Okay? As we move down the line, it may not be as relevant. We don't know yet, because what this stuff is still brand new. It's hot off the press. But y'all see the framework that we working with. And once we get to the sections actually for it, I'll break the full thing down. So don't worry. I do have that sketchbook already ready. But as you can see, we're moving through this, and we're kind of like reimagining and allowing ourselves to interact with the content just a little bit differently than maybe how we normally see it, as we apply a lot of the things that I'm learning with in contract law. So one thing I really hope that y'all take away from tonight is that the legal analyst doesn't have to be all about certainty. It begins with a little bit of curiosity, seeing a news article and be like, oh, okay, what's that about? Let me see how I can apply some things I already know. Y'all know how I am, transferable skills. What have I learned that we can apply to this situation so that we can understand it, right? A lot of times we've already been introduced to a lot of concepts and ideas, and we just don't know that it's applicable. So what pieces are applicable? What can we lay on there and say, okay, that makes sense, and it's appropriate? Not just that it makes sense, but it's appropriate. And then like dive in deeper. What documents can we pull to give us some more information? Get those receipts, right? So we can be all in that tea, right? All up in those receipts, as we say on this channel. So we start off with the headlines. You gotta start somewhere. We start off with the headlines, then we're gonna move into the documents, primary resources and sources. That's how this is starting. This is today one. Now that we kind of know some of the questions, because now hopefully, just like me, you have questions, you're interested, we're gonna dig into it. We're going to dig into it. I want y'all to see just a little bit of, where are we? Hey, I'm gonna show y'all this one. This is a sketchbook from contract law. Just the down and dirty, the basics. Hopefully, like I said, now that we know what questions need to be answered next, and we've gotten to that point, which is literally progress, right? Now that we have that, we understand the actual life cycle of contract, right? We know the life cycle of contract law. We know it's offer. One party makes a clear offer. Acceptance. Another party accepts. 3, what consideration? We just talking about Williams, Wood, and Roffey. There's a whole big discussion on what consideration started. So something of value and is exchanged. Intention. Parties intend to be legally bound. What by that agreement? Contract form. Legal obligations arise. Performance or breach, right? You gonna do it or you not. But there are rights and there are remedies that follow that. Right? So we familiar. Child, I promise. We all hip. We all hip to this thing, right? So I'm also gonna give you a little bit of a little teaser. So next time we get onto this live, what I'm thinking is gonna happen, we're gonna move beyond the news articles. What we've been talking about, we're gonna get into these receipts. And we're gonna start looking at some of them primary documents. I'm gonna see what we can find. We'll give a couple of days so we can see, let it marinate. Things like complaints and any motions to dismiss. Eventually the actual agreement, if it's available. Let's hope it's available, child. Ooh, I would love to get into that. That's where the real legal analyst kind of begins. Right now, I'm just setting the foundation. It's a sampler. It's something designed to get your mouth watered, to study with me, so I got people to study with. Okay? Because y'all my community, y'all are my tribe, y'all my people, and I need to study with people. Okay? So hopefully, if you enjoyed this learning out loud session with me, hopefully you'll subscribe, you'll come back, and we'll continue to work through contract law or criminal law, because child, I'm doing both of them as a 10-week sprint on both of them. I'm out here like Sonic the Hedgehog. You hear me? Pew, pew. You know how they be like, I'm waiting. I think I'm like really dating myself on this channel. I realize I really do sound like a millennial, which is hilarious. But I am doing these 10-week sprints, and I definitely like to build community around learning. I like to make it immersive so that it feels very comfortable, everyday thing that I can just talk about and vibe with, because the more that I can talk about it, I can apply it, I can adapt it, the better off I will be, not just for the exam, but just in life, the application. I'm not taking these classes just for the sake of taking them. Yes, I'm taking them because I want to learn and I personally enjoy them, but I would also like to feel like I can apply them and use them in life. So I'm so excited that you guys are willing to be in this journey with me. And child, if y'all can get it for the free, well, for the low, in this economy, yeah. Stay tuned. Subscribe. What? Comment. You don't always have to subscribe if you don't want to. I would definitely appreciate you subscribing. But like, comment, be engaged in the chat, because that helps me as I navigate the material. It does. I love the engagement. So whether you're studying law like me, interested in current events, child, you're just curious about legal reasoning, how certain things work, you're always welcome here. You're always welcome here to be a part of my community. So until next time, like, comment, subscribe, look on the channel, look to see if there's some other content, because now that I explain some of my framework, y'all probably not starting to notice a lot of this stuff is what these is case studies I've been hopping into. I found something, I studied it, and I want to apply it, and boom, here we go. All these videos later, right? I'm just so excited to be here with y'all. Y'all don't understand. I have so much fun on these lives. I never know who's coming into the lives, who I'm interacting with, so that makes it really fun. You guys challenged me to look at material differently than even I was planning. And you guys know I already walked in wanting to see the content differently. So I thank you all for your contributions. Every like, every engagement helps push my channel out to other people so that they can see if maybe they might like it. They would want to engage with it. So I always appreciate every single one of you. I feel like every person matters. Every encounter is impactful. And today especially, on today especially, I wanted to say today is a really important day. Today is a primary day, so I know a lot of people are probably out and about voting, doing things, just get civilly engaged. Always know that each person, your contribution matters. Get out there, get engaged, do your part when it comes to civic engagement. One piece of it, from my perspective, being abreast of what was going on in current events relevant to every class that I was studying, all the materials that I was studying. I thought that was really important. So that once again, when it's my opportunity to do something to make this world a better place, I'm able to do it. So I feel like my channel is one way that I'm doing that, because I'm sharing things that I'm learning with other people so that they can be informed and do with it as they wish. I see that we have Motley back. Hey! You always on the live. Shout out to Motley. Yes. And thank you for voting. I did too. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Where's my sticker? It's downstairs. But yeah, so excited. Thank you for your engagement. So what? If you're going out to vote today, hey, if you didn't get to this time, guess what? You can get it next time. November. Okay. So no worries. No worries. Once again, this is Adrian from Legally Everywhere with Child. We legally everywhere. We looking into everything. I really hope y'all got to enjoy this contract law case study review, where we're looking at Trump's organization versus the Capital One situation. And child, listen, it's brand new. So if I can find enough content to make it make sense for the whole 10 weeks and we can just stick with this one, we'll stick with this one. If not, it's okay. We can find something else and kind of work through the process and the steps. But, I'm really big on applications. So I just really want to see that we hit all the pieces that we need to hit so it all makes sense. And then we end up with something that's kind of like a capstone equivalent. It's not required, but it's just how my brain is. So that's what we're doing. Once again, it's Adrian, and I will see you all next time. You all stay lovely and stay safe. Stay informed and stay engaged. Until next video. Bye.